Hello everyone, welcome to Raaonline series of lectures on neurophysiology. So in this part we are going to see about the somatic sensations and sensory tracts specifically. Sensory system is the one which is responsible for receiving the different types of sensations as well as perceiving the meaning of or deciphering the meaning of each sensory stimuli. For example, the sensation may be a touch, it may be a pain, it may be a pressure, it may be a vision, or it may be a sound. Whatever it is, it has to be received by particular organ systems and it has to be delivered to the particular area in the brain where it integrates all the information and gives the meaning of that sensation. Okay, so the basic concepts in the sensory system includes you should have a receptor for receiving the sensation. Okay, the receptors are of different variety. For example, it may be a touch receptor, it may be a pain receptor. There are different varieties of touch receptors indeed actually. Okay, so this is a transmitter or a receiving organ which actually receives the signal, stimuli. Then what is a sensory unit? These receptors, they get the stimuli and they transmit the stimuli via electrical impulses via certain nerve fibers. Okay, so that is a sensory nerve. That sensory nerve which receives information from different types of receptors or any number of receptors, everything is included as a sensory unit. So one sensory nerve catering to different numbers of receptors is called as together sensory unit. Okay, this receptor field is actually conveying information about the number of receptors. Okay, so there may be number of receptors and the distribution of these receptors varies in different parts of the body. For example, tactile field of a skin present in the forearm is different from the tactile field of the skin present in the back. Okay, so this particularly denotes the number of the receptors that is devoted for a particular sensation in a particular area. That is about the receptor field. How all these receptors which receives the stimuli, they are sending the impulses to the higher centers, that is through the nerve fibers. The bundle of the nerve fibers are called as tracts and these are called as sensory tracts. So there are different types of sensations and accordingly the tracts are also classified in a variety of way. So that is about the sensory tracts. Okay, now where all these information regarding the sensations are reaching finally, it is reaching in the somatosensory cortex. Okay, so this is the place where the meaning of all the different sensations, the variations in the different sensations are all decoded and appropriate response may be initiated in connection with the motor part. Okay, so all these systems are important for appropriate perception of sensations and deciphering its meaning. This is about the sensory system. We will be seeing in detail about this sensory tracts and the somatosensory cortex in this lecture. Coming to the classification of somatic sensations, it may be superficial or deep. Okay, the superficial senses includes touch, pressure, tactile localization, that is ability to identify where it is stimulated, where the touch sensation is stimulated, that is called as topognosis or tactile localization. 2-point discrimination, that is ability to discriminate the two different touch sensations which is stimulated simultaneously. Okay, so that is 2-point discrimination. Pain and temperature, itch and tickle, sexual sensations and stereognosis. Okay, the deep sensations includes deep pain from the muscle or viscera. Okay, proprioception, that is the sensation regarding the joint and the position of the joints. Okay, and kinesthesia, the sensations or awareness related to the movement of the muscles and joints and body. All these things are kinesthesia. So this proprioception and kinesthesia can be classified into conscious and unconscious awareness. Conscious sensations includes joint and position sense, whereas unconscious proprioception includes awareness about the length of the muscle, force of the muscle contraction. All these are deep senses. Okay, so in the superficial sensation, consider the touch and the tactile localization. Even if mild alteration or changes happening in the stimulus strength, the touch and tactile localization will be perceived in a different way. So, such a type of sensation is called as epicritic sensation, which is highly discriminative in nature. Whereas pain, temperature, itch and tickle, these are the sensation which are non-discriminative in nature. That means that degree of strength of the stimuli will not alter the meaning of the sensation. That is, whether mild or strong stimulus, the pain will be perceived as pain, itch will be perceived as itch. Okay, so such a type of sensation is called as protopathic sensation. These are the general principles of the somatic sensory organization. Let us see one by one. Labeled line principle, that means there are different receptors for the sensation. The work of these receptors is to receive the stimuli and they send their electrical information along the axon of the sensory nerve fibers. These axons pass through different areas along the pathway. Finally, it reaches the cortex for understanding the meaning. Okay, so in this pathway, along anywhere in this pathway, if you stimulate the particular nerve fiber, not only on the receptor, anywhere along the pathway, if you stimulate the particular nerve fiber, the ultimate sensation that will be perceived is the one which has labeled line principle again. First property is about the labeled line principle. So, you know, the receptors receive the sensations, it gives information as electrical event along the axons. The axons travel along a various pathway and finally it reaches the cerebral cortex for understanding the meaning of the sensation. Okay, so in this pathway, not only from the receptor, if you just stimulate along anywhere along this pathway, the sensation that is perceived will be ultimately pertaining to that of the receptor. For example, anywhere along the touch pathway, if you stimulate, what sensation that will be perceived is only touch. Okay, so not pain or something else. Okay, so it is not only the receptors that is carrying the sensation from that particular sensation. Anywhere if you stimulate along that pathway, the sensation perceived will be the same thing. Okay, so that is called as labeled line principle because this pathway is labeled to particular sensation. That is called as labeled line principle. And the second principle is most of the pathways ascending from the receptors till the termination, they cross to the opposite side. If the receptors are in the right side, ultimately it goes and end in the left side cerebral cortex, like that. Okay, so most of the pathways cross and relative positions in the body are preserved upwards. For example, if the receptors are present in the lower limbs, it goes along a particular order in the spinal cord. Okay, the same position, relative position of the body will be maintained even it goes higher and even in the cerebral cortex. So that relative positions in the body are preserved as it goes upwards. Okay, and there is point to point localization. A particular part of the receptor will go and end in particular part of the spinal cord, and the same fibers, the same receptors will go and end in particular part of the thalamus and in the cerebral cortex. So there is actually a connection. This is called as point for point localization. Okay, and most of the fibers or 99% of the fibers, they project to the opposite side of the cortex that we already seen before. And most of the sensory pathways are polysynaptic. That means it includes 2 or 3 synapses in between. It is not just straight from the receptor to the cortex. In between you have got different stop points, and again the information continues in a different way. Okay, so that's why it is called as polysynaptic pathways. You have second order neurons, you have third order neurons.